Now, one or two of you have asked, why does the Prayer Book Society need a director or an interim CEO or whatever else? Well, let me try and explain the role in the context of the subjects we've been talking about over the last 36 hours. Now, I hope I know the answer to this. Has anyone heard of a chap with Stylianos Zortzis? No. Stylianos Zortzis. Excellent. Nobody has. He was the emperor's fixer at the last church council that sort of mattered in 870. And this church council was the one that said, no more changes. That's it. This is the Nicene Creed. The point of a chief executive or a director is to be the fixer in a much smaller way. So if you decide, as you should, that your membership should not be 2,500, it should be 5,000 or 7,000 or 8,000, someone's got to go and do that. And for every one of you who does tremendous work on the doorstep, at archdeacons' meetings, there needs to be someone who will hire the mailing list, organise the mailing, get the stuff designed. Likewise, if you decide to move, as I think you should, from having one major conference each year to 3 or 4 events for different purposes, reaching out to more people, someone has to fix that as well. And if someone has to go to very boring meetings at Church House to try and sew some things up, they're probably going to have to do that, because you ask a lot of your trustees, and each one of your trustees has another life, actually several different lives they need to fulfil. Being a trustee is a massive responsibility, but it also can and should be only a small part of your life. Bradley is exempt from this because he makes the PBS such a large part of his life, but you need a fixer. And I hope, and there are already some interesting expressions, you will find someone who will help you grow. But that is what you need to do. It is, first of all, a real privilege to be with you today. I make a confession, first of all, I'm not a member. Yet, as Bradley said, I will be a member, and I'll be very glad to join. And part of the reason I'm not a member is no one ever really brought you to my attention. I'm a historian. As you might have gathered, I have some very obscure historical interests. I'm interested in this chap Stylianos Zortzis, but he's typical of the middle-ranking Byzantine bureaucracy who will form the subject of my likely PhD. You're all going to sleep. I mustn't let that happen. But I must say from the outset, I'm not here as a long-term voice. I drew the parallel from Bede's ecclesiastical history. I'm the bird that flies through the king's mead hall. I see some of the light of what's going on, and I fly on. But I'm here to set the ground, to make things ready and steady for the person who will hopefully lead you as the director, working for the trustees for many years. And you have some important choices. And I'm going to pick on a quote. Here's Father Graham here. Well, he gave me this one yesterday. Picasso. Now, Picasso asked what heritage is. And is it your dad's old hat? Is it a new baby? Don't choose your dad's old hat. You have a vast potential to create I won't say lots of new babies, that sounds very odd. Lots of new things throughout the Church of England. And you must take it. Now, my task is to get you to the point when you do it. But remember this also. 12,500 Church of England churches, 2% are associated with the PBS actively. About 1 million people go to Anglican churches, and it's surprising it's that many at times, with some regularity, 0.25%. Just think if you had even 2% associated with the PBS, and you should and can and will aim for that, I hope. But I want to look back first of all, and your achievement's very real. Were it not for you, I think it's very unclear whether or not the Book of Common Prayer would still be used anywhere in the Church of England. You stood, you were stubborn, you were determined, and you worked day in and day out, and you worked thoughtfully. You worked at a doorstep level. You also worked with the sort of insight and intellect and theology that I've heard earlier on today and thoroughly enjoyed. Think too of the other things that are done at the moment. Now, the Cranbrough Awards, a stream of young people who have had a chance to discover the power of the words, the power of the creed, and hopefully that's going to stick with them. The publications are fantastic, very high quality. I just think you can do more with them. Branches, maintaining local witness. Now, I know some think they're going to have trouble surviving today's modern age. Others are very healthy, and these things come and go. But there are many things you can do, and actually the fact you've got a royal patron, and it was made very clear to John and I how much the royal patron supports the Book of Common Prayer, that says a great deal. Many charities were told very politely, that a slimmed down royal family cannot have so many charities attached to it. So you've saved the BCP, but if your first 50 years were about ensuring survival, surely the next 50 must be about growth. Not for growth's sake, but because many more people in the Anglican Communion deserve to receive the richness of the BCP. So in your strategic plan that you broadly adopted last year, you have 3 elements of mission, discipleship and community. Mission, the BCP is a tool for outreach. Discipleship, a lifelong frame for faith. Community, as a shared language for worship. And they're not slogans, they are real opportunities and choices that you can make to do a great deal more. But you'll do that because the conference in 5 years' time won't have 120 people. 3 conferences might have 500 people, and you can do that. Mission. Now, this is a very restless age. I mean, I've seen a stack of people here who remarkably haven't got their iPhones out for an hour or so. I mean, it's almost unheard of. But as a Book of Common Prayer, you can't and you don't just want to be a heritage text. And I don't think there's anyone here who just wants it to be a heritage text. In a restless culture, you've got to be a competing voice, and you've got to give people that ordered, structured worship, which has surprising and enduring power. I think the growth of choral evensong is one sign of that, which we'd all agree on. There is some evidence of a quiet return to the church. I am sceptical about its extent. Not that it's not happening, but that one swallow doesn't make a summer. But I think you can turn curiosity about discipleship in parishes so the BCP becomes, as many of you have talked about over the last couple of days, the BCP is a tool for mission, not just a relic for Thursday mornings. Now, in practice, some things, and you will have much better idea, and I hope the panel shortly will have much better ideas. So you need a much better resource for people to identify good BCP churches. In fact, at the AGM at the end, we talked about they did a good churches guide, a very ambitious project, but be ambitious. And in fact, Father Adam Gaunt, who can't be here today, I asked him what his ambition for the PBS was. He said one word, ambition. And you can have that. And I just found that joyful, that discussion. We had a seminar of corporate members. I don't think any of the participants are there, but there were 8 churches, all corporate members of the PBS, and they talked about what they wanted to make use of the BCP and its world easily accessible and usable in their churches. Many were quite new, many were occasional users, and usefully, a couple of them are church wardens, so they are in supporting roles. They want proper parish packs, they want model orders of service, they want a great idea. For small churches, a chap called Jonathan Munday from Devon, might have been Somerset, I'll be in trouble there, he suggested a musical resource. So, when you're actually putting the music on an iPad, you've actually got a range of resources you can use for a BCP service. There needs to be a lot more training for readers and ordinands. And I know very well just how little theologically many junior clergy are, how uncomfortable they are or unconfident they are with the BCP. And that's not a matter of fault, it's a matter of how our world is. Even in my early 60s, the religious education I had 45 years ago covered so much more of what is familiar ground for all of us than what almost anybody gets today. You need effective advocacy in dioceses. You need mentoring groups as well to support that mission. And that was one of the most obvious and clearest want from those clergy and those they want people they can talk to. And so you need a wider network. You need champions with each bishop. And actually, in spreading mission, I hate to say it, you need marketing. If you could get, using AI, a letter, a brochure and an offer to every clergy person who you can't rule out in a particular diocese, it would be very interesting to see how many new members you've got. Even if out of 900, you've got 30, or expressions of interest, or people on a mailing list. That's something you haven't systematically done. You've had other things to do. So, beyond these larger ambitions, I'm going to be daring. It's the place of an interim to say naughty things. I think you could become one of, if not the primary, liturgical resource for the Church of England. Now, there are people in other parts of the church who wouldn't go for that. I've got a dear friend who doesn't think it's for her. She's an evangelical. But it's because no one's actually sat down, looked at what she does, and actually, if she did more of that, she'd actually, I think, find herself quite comfortable. I've got another friend who was a college chaplain, but now runs a rock church in Pimlico. Very fashionable congregation, a real focus on helping the poor in social housing. She's very effective. And I thought this wouldn't be for her. But she then explained over a coffee how much the BCP had supported her chaplaincy in college. So you can reach many more people, but you need the fixer working with the staff to do that for you. It's not fair to ask members and trustees. Discipleship. So some of the things you could look at. So some of the things have been touched on. Catechismal resource. Resource for confirmants. So in fact, we've got a really generous offer from clergy and a college chaplain in Rugby who are already writing a resource pack for people going through confirmation. Not just the young people, but also the clergy and the parents supporting them. And trustees have said in principle they would like to support it. And you could do that, though you have some resources for that, right throughout the cycle of services which the church presents during people's lives. You also, I think, in accepting that for clergy who are not confident with the BCP, and I don't use it very often, I have to struggle to find my way around sometimes, you can make it easy. Now, I know that may seem like laziness, but starting with making it easy gets people into using it, and using gets it to be a habit, and then it becomes ingrained, and people become familiar with it and love it. And those initiatives will move you away from being a society about preservation to a society about growth, and by God, the Church of England needs you. But confirmation then is just the beginning. And if we reflect on the creeds anchor Christians in continuity, and in the same way, the BCP can provide a structure, a scaffold, right through people's lives. And the other thing, if there's one thing, a small thing I criticise the trustees for, is actually being guilty about thinking there are 100 things they haven't done. If you did 5 a year, you gradually move forward. And again, you need your fixer to do that. And it's unfair to expect trustees to do all those things. But you gradually move the BCP more centrally. You take 250 corporate members, that should be several hundred at the very least. Let me look at community. So that outreach in itself will bring people together. It's very clear that the corporate members that we spoke to, they didn't so much feel isolated as not knowing what was happening. Creating local networks, creating local gatherings, having local mentors, and you don't need to do it all at once, in patches, in areas, will create a rolling forward in itself. And although individual members are massively important, I think almost all of you here are individual rather than corporate members. Actually, individual membership has been relatively static. At the moment, broadly, as people leave this planet, new members come in. The demographic is actually better than I thought, but one of the trustees who remained nameless, and I had a discussion, I think I've lost this bet. He thought the average age of members was about 60. I thought it might be 65 or 70. It actually is younger, and it is starting to go down. New people are coming in, but you need many more. I will say that the actual average age of clergy is younger, and that's very, very important. Your subs rate has remained the same for since 2019. Your subscriptions should never be a very large part of your income, but there must be a blend of different incomes. But as though you've done well financially through legacies and careful planning, and that means you can and should take, not risk, but you can be expansive for 4 or 5 years. You can try things. You can see if a marketing campaign to 3 or 4 dioceses gets you those extra corporate members. And you can still have Happy Charity Commission that says in 5 years, if none of it works, we can move back somewhere to a country orchard barn as at the moment, and we'll still be okay for the very long term. But I do think corporate members are the longest term way of growing, because every good corporate member will try and get their congregation. So some of the things that you can do, from induction packs to new members, to better national visibility tools like that corporate register, like that directory of good churches, that presence in synods, that mentoring, much more regular communication, the corporates ask for that. They're not actually very extravagant, they don't take much money, you just need to do them one at a time and gradually. And with a director and 1 or 2 other staff, they're not so difficult and they will achieve growth. but not for its own sake, for finding new people and bringing them to the BCP. You can also learn from other charities, and I'm aware I'm eating at a panel time here. You're unique in its mission, but not its challenges. You could pick up good ideas from the Bible Society, the Church Army, the Cathedral Music Trust and Tier Fund about things ranging from strong communication to innovation in how you use your mission, to connecting heritage, right through to better models of governance and the supporter care, and I'll come back to that, as they could pick up ideas from you. The supporter care is important because one of the things we found with the corporate members is they don't feel their journey from interest to being a potential member to being a member, then being supported to become a very active member, and perhaps in time to be a mentor or a branch officer. They don't feel that at the moment is really happening. And your current structure doesn't always help that. It asks too much. So you don't need to imitate slavishly, but you can adopt new ideas. So, finishing, I've been preparing the ground, and I've hinted at some of the things that you can do. It's very important I do no more than a hint, because your new director with the trustees will work out the road they want to go on. And one of the important things about an interim is he certainly takes out membership, but he stands aside. But what I hope we have done is we're modernising systems, and that's not without one or two bumps, computers and IT being what they are. We'll have an effective membership database, a CRM system, fairly shortly, which I hope will make it much easier to contact a much wider range of people. And this is dreadfully bureaucratic, and I want to thank the Comas for their help on this. A safeguarding policy which actually will leave you with no risks about things. And I know this is dreadfully bureaucratic, but I'm afraid it reflects on the problems the Church of England has. You need to be safe and to have no risks. We've looked at staffing and how that's organised. We're looking at basic legalities and having them sorted out. We've looked to reconnect with lapsed members. We had an awful lot of them. Sadly, many of them are because the old database didn't deal with things when they passed on, but we have found some others. We've opened new conversations. But the next director, I think, will find the society steadier, clearer and more confident. But part of that is very much down to what the trustees have done. You're financially secure. I think you're theologically confident as well, as this conference shows and other conferences have shown. And although I know that you've had problems, as Prudence has quietly told me, about the way the board has worked in the distant past, you don't have them today. You have a really good group of trustees who are committed and active and have a wide range of skills. In time, you'll need some with other skills, and they know that. The world will move on. But most of all, the trustees and the director, with your ideas, must feel confident about getting on with the job. Setting some targets over time, take 2,500 members up to 4,000 or 5,000, get 500 or 600 corporate members. Hopefully the new Archbishop won't stand in your way, but I found, certainly in my connections, although there is still some concern from those with a certain view, I think the door is open, and I think the Church has little choices that when folks like you come along and say, how can we help bring in more people, they have to say yes. So your choices, I think, are to be a guardian of heritage or be a resource for mission. I think that's fairly clear. You should be a resource for mission. Rather than being a society for the already convinced, as you are, you need to reach new generations. You're starting to do it. And rather than preserving, you've done that successfully. Commit to growing.